Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
They will be destroyed.
Time, monster. You don't belong in this world.
I'm Dracula. I'm 12 million years old.
Hail, fellow travelers. Tim from Secret Fire Books here with another one of these unscripted, rambly kind of videos. It's more of a ramble, a book ramble, than a book review, because I actually did not finish the book that I'm talking about today. That's right, I DNF'd it. I don't usually DNF books. It's not that I have anything against DNFing. It's just usually when I pick up a book, I tend to look for something that interests me. I assume that there's got to be something in the book that will appeal to me somehow, even if it's toward the end. And so if I get to the end of a book and it turns out that I didn't like it, it's no big deal. I just cross it off my list. I say that I don't like it. If anyone asks me about it, I tell them that I wouldn't recommend it. It's as simple as that. It usually takes a lot for me to DNF a book. The book will have to do usually one of two things. It will either have to insult my intelligence or my own personal ethical, moral beliefs, which thank goodness doesn't happen a lot, or it has to be really, really boring. And even then, if it's a boring book but it's really short, I can get through it pretty easily. But if the book is just really, really uninteresting, and if I pick it up and I dread flipping through the pages because I just think, oh, there's nothing in this book that can interest me at all, it's just a real slog trying to get through it, that's when I'll put it down. And unfortunately, that's what happened with this book. This is The Dracula Tape by Fred Saberhagen. This book was originally published in 1975. It is a sort of alternate take of the original Bram Stoker novel, Dracula, originally published in 1897. Now, this is a book, Dracula, the original Dracula by Bram Stoker, is a book that I'd actually DNF'd multiple times in the past. The last time I tried reading this book, I must have been 19 or 20 years old. So I was a lot younger, and I think a lot less patient than I am now. And so this month, I decided to give Dracula another shot. I was going to muscle through it, finish it once and for all. And I actually really, really enjoyed this book, a lot more so than I thought I was going to. At the end of the year, this might be one of my favorite reads from 2025. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with Dracula. And so I was excited to pick up the Dracula Tape because, as I said, it's a sort of alternate take of the original novel. If you've never read Bram Stoker's Dracula, it is an epistolary novel, which means that it is compiled of fictional accounts by the characters, diary entries, journal entries, letters, newspaper articles, all written and compiled by the characters in the story. And they all have to do with their experiences with the character of Count Dracula. Now, the thing is, Dracula isn't actually in the book all that much. Even though the book bears his name as the title, Count Dracula is not in Dracula all that much. But Bram Stoker does such a good job of introducing the character and building him up as this really evil, dark, ominous villain that his presence is kind of felt throughout the entire novel, even when he's not on the page in person. And so he's in the book precious little, but he's a presence that's constantly felt in the book. But we never get to see anything from his point of view. We never read anything from his point of view. And that's what the Dracula Tape does. This book starts off with Count Dracula alive and well in the 1970s. I don't know how he survived having his body absolutely disintegrated at the end of the original novel, but it's a horror story, it's a fantasy, it's whatever. He can come back if he wants to. He's Dracula. So he's alive and well in the 1970s, and he is making an audio recording on a tape recorder explaining to the descendants of Jonathan and Mina Harker, two of the main characters from the first book, and basically explaining his point of view on the events that took place back in the 1890s. He's giving his side of the story that was presented in the original Dracula novel. Because according to him, everyone got everything wrong about him. Bram Stoker got everything wrong. Van Helsing got everything wrong. The Harkers, Quincy Morris, Dr. Seward, anyone who was involved in the original Dracula novel, they got everything wrong. Dracula actually had totally noble intentions for everyone in that story, or at the very least, he just wanted to be left alone, and a bunch of ignorant, stupid humans got in his way and ruined everything for everyone. That is the premise of this novel. And so I thought that would be a really interesting take on the character and on the story, because Dracula is such this universally known character. He's this infamous villain from fiction. You know, the name Dracula has become much larger than the character from the original novel ever was. And so I assume that this alternate take that paints him as more of a morally gray character would be really interesting. And unfortunately, this ended up being one of the most boring books I have read all year. Now, before I drag this book through the mud, I should say that there is one thing that I found interesting about it, in that Fred Saberhagen does try to tie in the life of the fictional Dracula with that of the historical Vlad Dracula, Vlad Tepes the Impaler, as he was known. I am fascinated by the life of Vlad Tepes. He was a very brutal, very cruel and merciless human being, but he did lead a very interesting, very fascinating life. So you can kind of go down the rabbit hole reading about all the really crazy things that happened to that guy and the really, really crazy things that he did to other people. So I did appreciate that Saberhagen ties in the fictional Dracula with the historical Dracula. It's something that's only kind of hinted at in the original novel, but in doing so, he also taps into something that I think really didn't work in this book's favor. It seems like Fred Saberhagen is just hell-bent on demystifying the character of Dracula and vampires in general. Constantly throughout this book, he is debunking all these myths about vampires. He kind of tries to break it down in an almost scientific kind of explanation, saying that vampires aren't evil. The undead aren't these hell-spawned demonic things. They're just an alternate form of life that human beings can take. And so that's what Dracula is. He's just this almost ascended being who's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I guess this is something that I kind of should have seen coming when getting into this book, because he can't really tell a story from Dracula's point of view without demystifying him a bit. But that said, I don't think Fred Saberhagen went about doing it in the right way. He really just kind of takes the character of Dracula and makes him really lame. That's the best way I know to describe this novel. It's a really lame retelling of the original Dracula. Like I said, in the original Bram Stoker novel, Dracula does not show up all that much. He's kind of just kept to the background. And that's because that novel works by one of the classic rules of horror storytelling. You're not supposed to show your villain for the most part. You're supposed to be really subtle about it. You're supposed to keep the tension building. And then at key moments where you need to ratchet up the horror, that's when you show the monster or the serial killer or whatever villain you're working with. That's why a lot of people say that the movie Jaws works so well, because you don't see the shark all that much. You just go long swaths of the movie with the suspense and the tension building and building and building. And then you get brief scenes where you see the shark and there's tons of gore and violence. And it's really effective. That's how Bram Stoker used Dracula in the original novel. But in the Dracula tape, he's our main character. He is our first-person narrator. And so you're constantly with Dracula. You're constantly seeing things from his point of view. And so there's really nothing horrific about the character. This is not a horror novel. I don't really know what genre to classify this book. I guess it's a thriller, but there's really not anything thrilling about it. And like I said, I guess I should have seen that coming, because if you're going to tell a story from Dracula's point of view, you gotta demystify the character a little bit. But Fred Saberhagen goes so much further than that. he turns Dracula into kind of a bumbling idiot. He's kind of a, I'd almost call him like a himbo. That's really the best way I know to describe him. He's just this big, dumb playboy who is just looking to have a good time. He just wants to integrate back into human society and, meet some pretty women and drink some blood. That's all he wants to do. But in every situation, he just kind of bumbles into them and makes them worse than they were before. For example, when Dracula meets Lucy Westenra, the character in the original novel who, he drinks all of her blood and turns her into a vampire, and then Van Helsing has to hunt her down and, drive the stake through her heart and all that. It starts off as just kind of this casual fling from Dracula's point of view. He sees this pretty girl and decides, hey, she's really attractive. I'd like to drink her blood. And, it's just like some playboy bumping into a beautiful woman and asking her out and then, having a casual one-night stand. That's how Dracula kind of sees things. And then it turns out he drinks so much of her blood that she needs a blood transfusion. And so Dr. Van Helsing performs a blood transfusion. But this is the late 1800s. And as we know, blood types haven't been discovered yet. And so in this story, the blood transfusion makes Lucy sick and she starts to die. And so in order to spare her, Dracula has to turn her into a vampire. And he kind of blames Dr. Seward and Dr. Van Helsing, who, performed the blood transfusion for this. It's their fault. They're the ones who killed this girl with the foreign blood transfusion. When in the first place, he's the one who drank all of her blood and made them perform the transfusion in the first place. So it really is his fault from the beginning, but he's just kind of excusing things away. That's the other thing. Anytime something happened in the original novel that was really horrific, in this book, Dracula explains it away in the lamest way possible. That not only paints him as a really big idiot, but it's just very unsatisfying. For instance, one of the most effective horror sequences in the original novel is when we're given the travel log of the captain of the Demeter, the ship that transported Dracula and his coffins from Transylvania to England. The captain, he's keeping a travel log and talking about all the weird things that are happening on this voyage, talking about how the sea is really against him, the weather has been awful for some reason, and how eventually it seems like there's something on this ship who's picking off his men one by one. And obviously it's Dracula. By the end of the travel log, it's obvious that it's Dracula who's been killing all the sailors on this ship. But in this book, Dracula kind of hand waves that away and is like, oh, it wasn't me. It was actually the first mate. The first mate of the Demeter went crazy and killed all of his friends. And that's the only explanation we get. And it's very, very unsatisfying. And so, yes, it is a story where Dracula is trying to, clear his good name, I guess. But it's just so wholly unsatisfying. At the end of the day, I really don't know what I was expecting from this. Because like I said, I thought it'd be a cool idea to get a more morally gray look at the character of Dracula. But what I got was just really boring. And like I said, it paints the character as this big, dumb idiot who, if he's not just kind of casually observing these things that are happening, he makes them worse. And that's the other thing. It seems like Dracula could have remedied a lot of the situations that happen in the original novel if he would have just been honest with people. Like, I feel like clearly he wants to integrate back into human society. So why doesn't he just come out and say, hey guys, my name's Dracula, I'm a vampire, but don't be alarmed or anything. I'm not trying to start any trouble. I'm not trying to kill people. But no, he decides to be all shady and creepy and do everything in the shadows and do everything so that people won't find out what's happening. And so he makes his situation worse for himself. That kid, everyone knows this kid. Maybe this was a kid you knew in high school or in your neighborhood growing up, but it's that one kid who is constantly getting into trouble, and yet they're constantly complaining about, oh, I don't have any friends, no one likes me. Yeah, no one likes you because you keep doing stupid stuff and getting into trouble. That's what Dracula is. He is this ancient vampire who refuses to keep his nose out of trouble and yet keeps complaining how no one likes him and everyone thinks he's evil. Yet no wonder, because you keep getting into trouble. Yeah, I'm really ranting at this point. The fact of the matter is, I only got about 160 pages, 169 pages in this 281 page novel. So, you know, a little less than halfway through it, I guess. But it was just an agonizing read for me. There was nothing of substance that I was getting out of this, and it was taking a character that I was really impressed with in the original novel and just making him very uninteresting. So I would not recommend the Dracula tape. I will not ever be finishing this book, no matter what people say in the comments, because I have a feeling that some people might have read this and might have some nice things to say, but I don't care. I can't be bothered to finish it. I know that Fred Saberhagen wrote some other Dracula books before this, where Dracula is the hero and he teams up with Sherlock Holmes and solves mysteries and stuff. And maybe that's why he wrote this book, because he wanted to kind of clear Dracula's name so that his hero for those other novels would be blameless in the reader's eyes, but it just didn't work for me. I will be reading other Saberhagen novels. I know that a lot of people liked his Book of Swords novels and his Berserker series. The Berserker series in particular gets a lot of high praise from a lot of people here on BookTube. But in the end, I just did not like this book, and it actually made me like Dracula even more, because this is still the superior vampire novel in my opinion. But I do intend on reading some more vampire stories throughout the month of October. I'm going to be reading Vampire Hunter D Demon Death Chase, which was the inspiration for the movie Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. I'm really excited to check that out. I do have a lot of other books that I need to read. I need to read the next Elric Saga novel. I need to read the H.P. Lovecraft story, Dreams in the Witch House. We will be reviewing Dreams in the Witch House on the next episode of the Elusive Exclusive Book Society. We're going to be live streaming that one over on Nick's channel, The Book Graveyard. That's going to be happening at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, October 22nd. And our special guests for that live stream are going to be Steve and Paul from Check Your Shelf, which is a really great little channel that I've just been falling in love with. Those guys are hilarious. I love hearing their takes on literature and pulp fiction. They're some great guys. They actually had me on an episode of their show not too long ago for Sumerian September. It was a lot of fun talking with them. They're great guys. I can't wait to see what they think of this H.P. Lovecraft story. So yeah, you don't want to miss that. And even though it probably won't change my mind, let me know in the comments, have you ever read the Dracula tape? What did you think of it? Whatever you say, it probably won't change my mind. I probably won't finish this book, but I do want to hear what people thought of it, if they disliked it as much as I did. But until next time, guys, as always, farewell and keep reading.
I'm not loyal to anybody. I'm a demon. I have no loyalty for anyone. Never did, never will. Shorty chose to be with a demon. Sounds like her problem to me. Ha ha. I'm him. I've been him. I will continue to be him.